Well, it's been a while since part 10 of the Grand Amato Interrogation review, and I have an update on the case. I usually don't do updates because I like to wait for the big picture to present itself and then kind of share the long term truths that we can learn from it. But this update is pertinent because Sylvie, the cam girl who incidentally just did her job, and little Grant came along and sacrificed more than he had to get less than nothing in return for her. She has visited Grant in prison 0 times. 0 times. That's the update. And why is that pertinent? Because it raises the question of why would Grant think that this is a legitimate relationship? Up to the time where he's going for an appeal, he told the guy that was helping him with it, yeah, the relationship was based on money, but all relationships are based on money. Of course, ignoring the lopsided nature of this relationship, of how much money he didn't earn he was giving away and how little he was getting in return. So the question is kind of answered next in the interrogation where we left off, when, as Anderson and Malteri are asking further questions into what Grant did around the time of the murders that haven't been brought up yet. Because in Grant's story that he's telling so far, he said how he left the house, he was kicked out of the house, he was driving around, Cody told him he would take care of it, and then Grant went to a job interview the next morning after spending all night in his car. So, as detailed as Anderson and Malteri are getting, they ask, describe what did the two interviewers look like that interviewed you for your job? And this is how we get Grant's view of maybe the world in general, but at least women, or at least what the viewpoint that he's descended to seeing at this stage of his life. Whether he always thought this way, I don't know, but this is the fantasy world he has descended to, because he describes these women as, the first one is maybe 30s, fake eyelashes, just a young, standard-looking woman. Then he's asked to describe the other woman who interviewed him, and he says 40s, white, also just a standard-looking woman. Now, it's understandable to have no impression or opinion or memory of a person that you just met once. But what Grant is doing, because he's making the effort to describe them, but in describing them, he could just say, I don't really remember, or 40s, but he's relegating these women to being just a standard-looking woman. Women, there are billions of women, and they can be described in billions of different ways. And he's describing these two separate women who look different as both being just a standard-looking woman. I guess because they don't wear kinky costumes or take them off in front of him or tell him how great he is or that they love him. So every woman other than that is just a standard-looking woman. That they're not playing into this expensive fantasy that he's just become lost in, this addiction where he's delusional. And this is how he sees the world now. Because he's failing to see the value in a standard-looking woman, and he's only seeing the value in this fantasy world woman who says whatever he wants to hear and wears whatever he wants to hear and takes off whatever he wants her to take off for a hefty price of $10.80 a minute. There's nothing in the world I would pay $10.80 a minute for, but he's paying that to get everything he wants from this woman in Bulgaria. Failing to see the long-term value in a woman who doesn't just do that for every guy for money, who will tell you what's wrong with you so that you can improve and your long-term health will be better, But it's dangerously short-sighted and unhealthy to just be told whatever you want to hear to make you feel good in the moment, or to have someone do whatever you want them to do in front of you. Like most addictions, it's short-term satisfaction and long-term consequences. And Grant's long-term consequences is that he's failing to see what stands out about the standard-looking women that he's now describing. They don't stand out to him anymore because they're not porn. They're not very extremely expensive porn. So that's where Grant is in his mind at this time. Everyone in the world who's not an expensive porn actress is just a standard-looking woman. And you can always tell that a murder was premeditated when the murderer calmly describes all of the details that make them look innocent. Now, earlier in the series, I kind of mentioned how someone could be doing everything that's Grant's doing so far in this interrogation and still be innocent. They could be saying all the same things with no curiosity or urgency, knowing what Grant knows, and be innocent. But we're getting to where Grant branches off now because his lies are starting to crumble under these follow-up questions and scrutiny that Anderson and Malteri are interrogating him with. When the truth behind his lies is seen, then there's no longer any excuse for Grant's lack of curiosity or concern or urgency. It was excusable in the beginning, but now it's no longer excusable. And it begins when Grant is caught for the first time in one of his lies, because they're asking him more about what he did that morning after the interview, and he says he thought about driving by the house, but then he didn't. And they ask him, how far did you get? And he says he got within a mile or half a mile. And through further questions, Grant admits to seeing a news van, police vehicles, and then looking up, because of the news van and the police vehicles in his neighborhood, he looked up a news report video about a shooting in his neighborhood. And he says, but he didn't really see what the report was, who it was, or what house it was. He only looked at it for 20 seconds, just long enough to see a driveway or something. But then he clicked off. And now there's no excuse for that. And Anderson and Malteri will bite on that. The fact that he saw this stuff in his neighborhood after what happened, the way he left and all the bad feelings that were left, and Cody saying he would take care of it. You had no curiosity about this situation developing in your neighborhood, as anyone would. There's no longer, no longer any excuse for this lack of concern or curiosity or urgency. You'd be asking questions at this point about why you're in an interrogation. So what this is happening now is like, it's almost like for Grant, now that the feature-length presentation of his cover story is over, all of these unprepared for questions from the detectives are like the behind-the-scenes interview after the movie when it's about to come out, where Grant is now revealing the secrets to how the movie was made and revealing the magic, so to speak, but it's unintentional because he doesn't want to. And the reason it's unintentional and he keeps doing it at this stage, before he's accused, but after his cover story has been fully fleshed out, and now he's into these prepared for questions, revealing the magic to how the cover story was made. He keeps doing it unaware of how guilty he looks, because I imagine as a storyteller that this is like a making it up as you go along portion of the interrogation for Grant. And as a storyteller, I can imagine that this part of his cover story in the interrogation feels the best, because it's almost like editing your final draft. He's gotten out the whole cover story that he prepared for. He didn't know how it was going to go, how it was going to sound, and now he's gotten it all out, and we covered that already earlier in the review. And it's like, whew, that's over with finally. And I'm not guilty yet. They haven't arrested me yet, so it worked. But now they're asking him all these follow-up questions, and he's having to kind of lie on the spot. But his audience is completely engaged with the new details he's given. They're seemingly buying everything he's saying, and the fleshing out of the story is way more satisfying now that he's adding these new details. It's becoming a more fleshed out story, and his audience is seemingly buying everything he's saying. So I imagine that this must feel the best for Grant. It's going way better than he expected it to beforehand because he couldn't plan for all these follow-up questions that the detectives would ask him. And now that he's answering them, just one after the other, answering all the questions, and it's going great because he's not arrested yet, and they're still believing him and on his side, apparently. So when you're riding high on this creative wave, you can tend to get sloppy. You can have this feeling of power and that you can do no wrong, and that's when you get sloppy. And an example of that sloppiness with Grant is how at first one of these details that he's adding up in this behind the scenes interview to the making of his cover story is that he used Cody's credit card to pay off a $599.99 bill from Sylvie. Now, the detectives question how he got these credit cards. He has Cody and Chad's credit cards. If he got kicked out of the house, how does he have these credit cards? Now, his basic answer at first is they gave him the credit cards. And specifically, when they ask him more questions about how it happened, he says Cody gave him the credit card saying, use this to survive. Now, it's going to be revealed later on that Grant didn't actually buy any food, and he didn't buy a hotel room either with this credit card. And Cody said, use it to survive. So survive by paying off the porno bill. He didn't get shelter. He didn't get food. He paid off a porno bill to survive. So the porn, apparently, to Grant is more important than the food or the shelter. That's what he's accidentally revealing about himself through all this questioning. And Grant, you might be wondering if you have a somewhat healthy mindset, even if your life maybe isn't going the way you want to, you can deal with it mentally, as tough as it might be. You might be wondering, how could porn be more important than food and shelter to any human being? Well, at this stage, Grant was desperate to repair the relationship with Sylvie because, remember, Chad, the dad, had revealed the truth of Grant's life to Sylvie. He wasn't what he was saying. He wasn't this rich social media superstar. He lived with his parents, was unemployed, and was using all of his family's money to pay for her services. And Grant had written a long, long letter to the other men in Sylvie's fan club chat room. I don't know how this world works exactly, other than just what I found out through this case. But apparently a group of guys that likes Sylvie, or whatever the porn actress of the week is, they get together in these chat rooms and talk about how much they like chatting with these porn chicks. So Grant wrote a long letter to them professing his true, undying love to Sylvie and how she was the only one and how he'll never have anyone else but her. And he just apologizing to Sylvie for lying, and he would do anything to make it up for her, and she'll always be the only one for him, is what he's saying to the other men in Sylvie's fan club chat room. The other men that she does the same things for Grant with. So Sylvie has the same relationship with other men. But Grant has an undying devotion to her. So Grant knows that their relationship is nothing special to Sylvie. Again, he's at the bottom of his immediate group, this group of guys that gets together in the chat rooms and talks about how much they love Sylvie. He's now at the bottom because he's been outed as having a sedentary lifestyle dependent on others, while the other men are still in their fantasy world where they're great. So he's now desperate again to rise in the ranks, which is why he's using this card to pay off the bill so he can get in touch with Sylvie again. So he can rise back up in the ranks, which is why he wrote the letter. And when he couldn't rise up in the ranks, when he couldn't pay to get in touch with Sylvie again, he wrote that letter to the other men in the chat room. That was the only way. He was hoping that his apology and his profession of undying love and devotion to Sylvie would get back to her through the other men in the chat room, because he couldn't talk to her because he wouldn't pay up the money. So now He thought he could apologize and that would make everything better because he was sorry for lying. And I've never been a betting man. There are way too many uncertainties in this world to trust anything with luck. However, I would be willing to bet every penny I've earned that Sylvie could not possibly care less that Grant lied to her about his lifestyle. She couldn't care less if you paid her $10.80 a minute to do so. She's just doing her job. She doesn't care what Grant does in his free time, who he is. As long as he's paying that money for her services, she will give him the services. And that's where it ends. Oh, I have one more update before we go. The conjugal visit counter for Grant in prison stands at 0. It still stands at 0. Do you think he gets it yet? Well, maybe we'll find out next time in part 12, so I'll see you then.